have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tokimaru and I'm here to have a look at Swamp Keeper. This is a top-down rogue-lite action shooter game by a Korean development studio named Maetdol Games, who previously made a 2D roguelite platformer, which while I haven't played, I will sing the praises of their 2D pixel art. This game and that game are incredibly good-looking pixel art games, I will say. Now, let's start by jumping into the options menu. We actually have an extremely robust options menu this time, despite being for a 2D pixel art game. First of all, we have 3 volume sliders, very good to see, full screen on or off. We have resolution, which we can adjust if we turn off full screen, which I'm not going to do for the sake of the recording. We have VSync on or off, and if we turn off VSync, we have a max FPS option, which is very good. It doesn't even go below 60. That's how you know they're professionals, fellas. Gameplay, we have several different localizations, which is surprising. I was surprised to see that it's not just English and Korean. We have several different languages down the list here. I will say there isn't that much to localize in terms of dialogue or story in this game. It is mostly item descriptions and menu options and things like that, but I haven't noticed any mistakes so far, so they've done a very good job of that. We have screen shake adjustment, we have the gamepad vibration, gamepad aim assist, which I would like to show off once we get into the game. We can turn on or off, dodge towards mouse, and we have clear data. In terms of input, we can adjust all of our keys, and if I switch to controller, it switches to the controller key bindings. Personally, I would prefer if both the gamepad and keyboard options were on the screen at the same time, but they do allow you to rebind them both separately, which is very good. I will say probably the one biggest criticism I have of this options menu is I would suggest that they add a colorblind mode to this game, simply because this is a game where a lot of enemies can be on the screen at the same time, and there are certain parts of the game where a lot of them have very samey color palettes. The early levels, not so much. I think they do a good job at differentiating the color palettes of a lot of the early enemies, but later into the game, they start to bleed together. So I would like a colorblind option for accessibility purposes, making it easier to differentiate enemies as well as the player character. Though the player character does look very different from the enemies. But other than that, like I said, quite a robust options menu. I can't think of that much more that you would need for a 2D pixel art game like this. Now, let's jump into the game. So this is Swamp Keeper. You are playing as the Swamp Keeper. You are a lizard that protects the swamp with naught but your bow and arrow. This is like I said, it's a very beautiful looking game. They are extremely competent with their pixel art. I love the color palettes they use. For both the character and the enemies. They have extremely smooth, very well done animations. Let me show you some gameplay. So you are the Swamp Keeper. You have a bow and arrow. You can aim in any direction, and if you fire, or if you hold the fire button, you can charge up an arrow and you can shoot it. And when you fire off an arrow, you can fire it off partly charged or fully charged. There is a difference. If you hit an enemy with a partly charged arrow, it will stick into them. If you hit an enemy with a fully charged arrow, it will pierce through them and also hit the enemy behind them. There are also enemies that have armor, like these guys. They have little armor pips above them. If you shoot them with one arrow, it will get rid of one armor pip. And if you shoot them with a charged arrow, the charged arrow can pierce through one armor and break the second armor, leaving them with one armor remaining, and you can hit them with another fully charged one to finish them off. There are a few things that can change that, but for the most part, that is basically how the shooting works. you may notice we have below us, we have two little yellow things. That gives us 2 dodges. Initially, I thought, wow, that's pretty generous, but given the recharge time of this and the rate at which enemies spawn and get close to you, it's actually very, very skill intensive to choose when or when not to use your dodges, because you move kind of slow. You move kind of slow in this game, and you only have your 2 dodges. And once you're out, and eventually you're going to get to a point where you're swarmed by enemies, and you have to figure out the best pattern to dodge in to actually escape all of them. Additionally, if you look at the very bottom, we have 2 abilities. We have our shift ability, and we have our right-click ability. You have a huge variety of different abilities that you can get as you play the game, but they start you with these 2. They are the horn and the rain of arrows. If I click shift, it knocks away everybody near me, and if I hold right click, I have a huge area that I can target my AoE in. Additionally, I did forget to mention this, but we have an arrow counter at the bottom of the screen here. I have a total of 8 arrows, and once I run out of arrows, I am completely out. You can get your arrows back by number 1, walking over them manually, or number 2, pressing the reload button, which drags them all toward you. Now, that might seem extremely strong, however, I'm going to show you in a second. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. If you run out of arrows and you try to reload and you have a lot of enemies near you, you might say, oh, well, I should get all my arrows back so I can kill all these enemies. But, oh, one got too close and you try to shoot your arrow, the arrows will stop mid-flight. So you have to be extremely conservative about your arrow use and careful about how close the enemies are getting and when you can actually recharge your arrows, because at certain points of the game, it actually does get really difficult once you run out of arrows to try and get your arrows back, because enemies might be way too close for you to wait for all of your arrows to come back. So you might be fine with, say, we have a couple arrows over there, we have a couple arrows over here, and I want to fight these 2. You might be fine with only getting a couple arrows and then shooting an arrow and then waiting a second and getting the rest of your arrows. This game is highly focused on a skill-intensive experience, and you'll see there's a lot to that. That is the basic gameplay of how the game works. I believe when you first start the game, they actually just drop you straight into a run. So before I show you anything else, I will just run into a normal run. They do start you with a difficulty slider at the very beginning. However, it's only easy and normal difficulty. They do unlock more things as you progress through the game and as you beat the game. However, I'm going to ignore that. There are things on the screen. I'm going to choose to ignore them for now. Now, this is the gameplay of the game. You are the Swamp Keeper. You are defending your area. Enemies are going to spawn periodically from gates at the edge of the map. You basically have this small area with a few obstacles to run around in. You can't leave. You have to defend. You have this small area that you have to defend. Whoops. So, as you can see, I just got my tail cut off. This game, it is very, very easy to die. It's extremely easy to die because every hit does 1 damage to you, and you can only take 2 damage and then you're dead and you have to restart the entire run. Once you get hit once, your tail gets cut off, but if you get hit a second time, then you're dead for sure. There we go. Let's start with a quick restart. I just wanted to show you dying. So, like you just saw there, it's extremely easy to die if you are not paying attention. But this is basically what you're going to be doing for most of the game. You're going to try and find the best way to move around to try and keep vision on the entire area. You're managing what direction you're keeping certain enemies in, and you're trying to pay attention to how many arrows you have left in your quiver. I'm just trying to get through this. Oh yeah, additionally, I didn't show you this when we were showing off the arrow mechanics, but if you maximum charge your arrow and shoot through an enemy that doesn't have armor, it will kill the enemy behind it. Piercing both pierces armor and also pierces physical enemies. let me fire off one of these. I will say I am actually a lot better at the game than this, but it is a little bit difficult to do while explaining how the game works at the same time. Okay, let me show you a couple more things that I think are very important about the game. So after you've died or completed your first run, which is extremely difficult to do, I will say, you come back to your little home base. Now here you immediately have this unlocked, the ability to customize your arrow. This is a very important part of the game. It is a way, because you only have the bow. You don't have any more weapons. You can get a couple of items that grant you sort of pseudo weapons and abilities and things, but for the most part, it is just your bow and arrow. This is the arrow system. You can customize various parts of your weapon to adjust the characteristics that your bow does. You can see if I change the arrowhead, it changes the penetration. So like I said, usually when you fully charge an arrow, it will pierce through an enemy or pierce through an enemy's armor. But if I change my arrowhead to 0 penetration, it will not pierce that enemy. However, the way that the arrow system works is, you might be asking yourself, why can't I just get like the best items? Why can't I just have minimum drawing time, the maximum number of arrows, max range, everything? It's because this relies on the risk system, which is a certain amount of points that you have to use for parts of your arrow. You can only have 10 risk at any time. 20 risk does not work. You can't have an arrow with 20 risk. So you have to manage and sacrifice certain characteristics of your bow and arrow to your preferred gameplay style. What I like to do is I like to have 0 penetration. I like to have maximum number of arrows. We'll switch drawing time to normal. We're going to decrease our max range to 0 and knocking time to its bare minimum. And that is a perfect 10 risk, because what this does is it basically lets me shoot arrows really quickly. They only have a very short range, so you can see here, normally it would shoot a lot farther than this, but this is the maximum range that I have on this now. And I can't pierce through enemies, but what I can do is I can shoot like 5 arrows at once and immediately tear through someone's armor. So that's what I like to do. It's very cool. You actually have most of these options unlocked at the start of the game, and it only takes a couple of runs for you to unlock all of them. Additionally, you have 2 skills. I believe you only have like 6 of them, 6 or 8 of them unlocked at the beginning of the game. And as you play through the game and do different things, you unlock the rest of these. I have about 5.5 to 6 hours of gameplay, and it took me about 2.5 to 3 hours to beat a run for the first time. And by the time I did that, I had a majority of these unlocked. So I will say it's not difficult to unlock things, and I don't think that's the point. I think they want you to have as many options as possible because they want you to customize your experience to your preference, rather than being the type of game like Enter the Gungeon or Binding of Isaac, where it's a lot of random things happening. Sometimes you just get different kinds of guns. They don't want runs differentiated by a ton of different random events. There is a little bit of randomness in terms of items that you get, which I will show off in a moment. But they want you to differentiate runs by customizing it to different gameplay styles and being like, oh, what if I complete a run using this skill? What if I play it like this instead? What if I customize my arrow to be like this? Like I said, this game is about difficulty and skill-intensive gameplay rather than the sort of random experience of a lot of modern roguelite games where you're getting a whole bunch of different random items or weapons and differentiating each run like that. Now, let me sorry, let me adjust my skills to my preference. I like to get this dash skill and this dragon skill. The dash makes survivability in huge crowds a lot easier. I like the dragon skill just because it goes through walls. I'm going to ignore this once again. Let me try and get through one of these things. So, I don't know if I would necessarily say this is a problem, but one thing about this game is that, like I said, this game isn't defined by run-to-run randomness. It's defined by different choices in customization to make the gameplay interesting. And one detail about the game that I think contributes to that feeling is that once you get into later levels of the game, a lot of the enemies are just slightly more difficult versions of the enemies that you're seeing now. There are a couple new types of enemies that get introduced later, but for the most part, they're very similar to these enemies. They do have different sprites, but they have extremely similar actions that they do. For instance, this is just the enemy that runs straight to you. This is the enemy that has armor. We have a shooting enemy with a ranged attack. And when you get later into the game, it's like, oh, the ranged enemy has slightly longer range, or, oh, the ranged enemy now shoots 3 arrows. But for the most part, there isn't a huge variety of different kinds of special enemies that you encounter throughout the game, which is a little bit of a criticism because it ends up making a lot of how you're expecting the enemies to act to be very, very similar run to run. Now, that is a problem for some people, but I think that's actually a strength of the game. Because like I said, it's a mostly skill-intensive experience, and I think what they want is for you to know exactly what to expect run to run, with one exception, as all roguelike games tend to do. You get to choose between 3 items. You get one of these and the other 2 go away. I'm going to get Jade Bell. Arrows are occasionally retrieved immediately when they stick. It synergizes with my very fast shooting arrow strategy, because it means I can spam arrows as much as possible and not necessarily have to worry about running out as fast. So after each area, in each area, you get to defend an area, then you go into your little rest area where you can change your arrow if you want to. You get 1 of 3 items, and then additionally, if you manage to survive to the end of the area without taking damage, which means you still have your tail, you get an additional reward. If you lose your tail, then here it just has a new tail for you to get. Now, this is something that I feel is worth criticizing about the game, is that I feel like they intended the tail reward to be... what they wanted is for it to be a reward for being skilled at the game. But what I feel is that if you just happen to get lucky early in the game, like if you're not skilled at the game, if you're new to the game and you just happen to get lucky, then you get your tail reward and it ends up snowballing and making the game a lot easier. And if you're skilled at the game, it's like, oh, well, I just get 2 rewards. I just always get 2 rewards, and the rest of the run ends up being a lot easier. It feels like, even though they want to reward skill-based gameplay with that, it ends up just feeling like a way to sort of snowball your way to the end without necessarily having to get good like they want you to. But then again, you can also just choose not to take it. You can choose not to take any of the rewards and make it a lot more difficult on yourself. Now, after you've done that, you usually have to go through a little gauntlet. Let me get through here. Here's one slightly different enemy. He has 3 armor and then he turns into a rat, but other than that, he's not that much different to just the regular dog with armor for the most part. There we go. And once you clear your little mini gauntlet, you go into the second area. You do another defense section, and then after that, they send you to a boss, and you basically have to do that 3 times. So there are 3 segments of the game where you have to fight 3 bosses, and in each of them, you have 2 area defense, and a couple of gauntlets in between. Now, I will say, let me see if I can get through here so I can show you the boss. Something I will say about the bosses in this game, unlike in games like Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, there aren't actually a huge variety of bosses that you face in each level. Each area only has 1 predetermined boss. So in total, there are only 3 bosses in this entire game. It is an extremely short game, and like I said, there isn't that much differentiation because they aren't doing sort of randomness-based runs other than the items. It is mostly, they want you to know what to expect in each run. So they only have a couple bosses. Sorry, now I'm getting distracted because I'm trying to survive. So they only have a couple bosses, and that's my bad. I completely whiffed it. So they, oh God, I got distracted. Okay. So like I said, there are only 3 bosses in the entire game, and then that's it. Once you get to the 3rd boss and you beat him, you beat the entire game on its most basic form. And I think for some people, they're gonna have a problem with that because people want a long experience. However, what I will say is that this game is only $3.99 or your regional equivalent on Steam. So despite its short length, I think that the amount of love and effort and skill that went into crafting this game is extremely worth the price. I think just having a, say 2.5 to 3 hour game for $3.99 with it, a lot of replayability actually. This game has a lot of replayability for that cheap of a price is extremely worth it. Now that I've gotten back here, let me actually explain a little bit more of the replayability. So once you've unlocked all of the arrows and the items, that's basically all of the base gameplay. Now, after you beat the game, there are a few additional things that unlock. There are these things. So these are ways of modulating the difficulty, which is, I think, the main draw of the game and the thing that makes the game replayable. You can adjust the speed at which enemies spawn and the length of the timer for each area of the game. So like, for instance, a lot of the times in these roguelite games, once you get good enough, the early areas sort of end up being a little bit of a slog that you just kind of have to go through. But with this, you can make it twice as fast to go through the earlier areas and make them twice as difficult, which makes it extremely fun to sort of try and jump back into getting to where you were. If you made it to, say, government office and you keep on dying there and you have to keep on going through these first couple of areas every time and you're like, oh man, well, it takes like 2 minutes to get through here. You can just speed it up and it's a lot more fun. Additionally, there are disciplines which you unlock after you beat the game. These are different ways of modulating how the enemies act and events that happen during the game to make them more difficult. There, you can see a lot of them are very different, like enemy arrow rain falls at set intervals. That's not really something that happens during the main game. This one changes some enemies to grant movement speed around them. So even though there isn't that much basic enemy differentiation in the game, there are a lot of ways to make the run-to-run experience a lot different and a lot more interesting per your personal preference. And I think that's actually really cool. And it's kept me playing past beating the game. Even though I beat the game in about 2.5 to 3 hours, I have about 6-ish hours of gameplay total because I just kept on wanting to play the game and improve and try different tactics, see what different kinds of arrows I want to play with, see what different kinds of disciplines I can add to make it more difficult. Additionally, in addition to doing the normal mode, there is also basically what I'm pretty sure it's just a score attack infinite run where you're trying to get as far as possible and get a high score. These disciplines also add to your score at the end of the run, so I'm just gonna quickly show you this. You have this one little practice room that you stay in. Instead of like one run where you're going from area to area, you're staying here, which is basically the same thing as a run. You just don't get the aesthetics of different areas. I will say the aesthetics of the areas are really cool. Again, I praise the art team of this game. I think this game looks phenomenal. And it just sort of changes the obstacles in the room from game to game. And now you can see how fast enemies spawn now that I've changed some things. If you thought it looked pretty difficult before, it gets far more difficult when you add all of these things on. And it's really cool to try and experiment. Oh God, there's so many of those guys. Oh, I messed up. It's so much fun to experiment with all the different options that you have. But yeah, that's basically it. And when you get to the end, it calculates your score. And then you can see I have a record of 6,600, and I think that's like around the final boss-ish, plus a few disciplines. But yeah, that's basically most of the game. Oh, I believe I also forgot to show this off. I meant to show this off at the beginning of the video, however, I did end up forgetting. So if I switch to controller gameplay, for the most part, it's pretty smooth. I do think these sort of top-down twin-stick-esque shooters are good with controller. I prefer mouse, especially for this game, because in this game you have to hold the trigger to charge your arrow, which ends up feeling a little bit weird when you're holding and releasing at different intervals, while also using your thumb to control the stick to aim. But I believe they have this sort of they have this aim assist option that I wanted to show off, where once you get within a certain distance of aiming at an enemy, it auto locks onto it for you, which is really cool. It's a really cool accessibility option if you're having difficulty aiming with the controller. Maybe that's like your only option and you just generally prefer controller over mouse and keyboard. It does have different, like I showed off here, it has different assist strength, and I believe that's like how close you have to be aiming at an enemy for it to auto lock on. I didn't actually see that many degrees of difference between the minimum where is it? Between the minimum and maximum assist strength. Oh yeah, it's actually more than I thought. It's not that much, but it is a lot more than I thought. But yeah, you have a bunch of different options for that. It's actually really cool. And yeah, that's pretty much everything about this game. I don't want to go through and necessarily show you the whole game because, like I said, it is pretty short. So I don't want to show off every area and show you every boss. And also I don't want to spend the rest of the day here. But yeah, it's an extremely difficult, skill-intensive game that is highly variable and highly customizable, with beautiful art, amazing music, and even if this type of gameplay isn't necessarily your thing, I do think it's worth keeping an eye on the devs, because I think that they have a lot of skill and love and effort that they put into both this game and their previous game, to the point where I think I'd be really interested in seeing what games they produce in the future. I think they're that good. But yeah, has been Swamp Keeper. My name has been Tokimaru, and I will see you all next time.